In 2013, elected officials in some of the poorest counties in Appalachia proposed banning a product from being purchased with government food assistance. Not liquor, not tobacco, a soft drink, the kind sold in every gas station in the country, sitting on shelves next to bread and milk. Dentists in the region had already given the local epidemic of rotted teeth a name, and it wasn't a medical term. It was a brand name. They called it Mountain Dew Mouth. Public health researchers reported that roughly a quarter of preschool-aged children in parts of the region already had tooth decay, and dentists described teenagers pulling their own teeth out with pliers rather than wait for care that might never come. Lawmakers wanted this drink struck from what food stamps could buy, the same restriction already placed on alcohol. It never happened, not because nobody tried, because by then, the drink was too deeply woven into the region to simply remove. What almost nobody pushing that ban seemed to know is that decades earlier, this same drink had been invented specifically to get around a different kind of prohibition, the kind involving actual liquor, actual moonshine, and actual federal agents. This is the story of a ban that failed in the 2010s. But it begins in the early 1930s, in the hill country of East Tennessee, with two brothers who built a soda to dodge a completely different law. Barney and Ally Hartman ran a bottling business in Augusta, Georgia, until it shut down and forced them to relocate to Knoxville, Tennessee. Sources differ on the exact year, somewhere between 1930 and 1932, but the reason for the move is well documented. In Tennessee, the brothers discovered a problem. Their favorite whiskey mixer back home, a lemon-lime soda called Natural Setup, simply wasn't sold there. This was Depression-era Appalachia, where legal whiskey was expensive and often scarce, and homemade liquor filled the gap in more households than official records ever counted. Rather than travel 300 miles to restock a soda, the Hartmans decided to make their own. What they created was clear, caffeine-free, and tasted close to what we'd now call Sprite. It wasn't built to be sold. It was built to sit on a shelf next to their liquor. The name came from a joke, and not a new one. Mountain Dew had been slang for moonshine since at least the 1800s. Well known enough that a folk song using the phrase had already been recorded in 1928 and was still being performed by musicians like Grandpa Jones. The Hartmans decided their mixer tasted close enough to the real thing that the nickname fit. Here's a detail most people miss entirely. The Hartmans weren't even the first in Knoxville to slap that name on a soda. 20 years earlier, a Hungarian immigrant named Max Licht had briefly sold his own barrel-shaped bottled sodas under names like Grape Dew and a lemon flavor he called Mountain Dew. The Hartmans' most famous decision, the name that would eventually be worth billions, might not have even been original. In 1946, the brothers carried an early batch of their mixer to a beverage industry convention in Gatlinburg. They went expecting nothing. To them, it was a private label goof, something they bottled for friends and co-workers rather than the public. Instead, other bottlers at the convention told them the drink could actually make money. It was there that the Hartmans first met Charlie Gordon of Tri-City Beverage, a connection that would matter far more than anyone in that room realized at the time. Most companies in the Hartmans' position would have hidden any connection to illegal liquor. The Hartmans did the opposite. Their 1948 label featured a barefoot cartoon hillbilly named Willie, firing a shotgun at a government revenue agent fleeing an outhouse. The slogan promised the drink would tickle your innards. They filed for the trademark that November, though the patent office wouldn't actually register it for another 5 years, until 1953. A soda company had just built its entire identity around the criminal manufacture of alcohol. It worked. Then, in 1949, Barney died of a heart attack, leaving Ally as sole owner of a regional novelty drink with barely any real distribution. For 8 years he held on. In 1957, he finally sold the rights to the Tip Corporation of Virginia. The clear, caffeine-free joke two brothers had bottled for themselves was now somebody else's problem to fix. That fix came from two men. Bill Bridgeforth of Tri-City Beverage spent 1958 solving the drink's carbonation problems and merging in his own citrus lemonade recipe. Then William Bill Jones of Tip Corporation refined the formula further, adding the sharper citrus tang and the caffeine that finally made Mountain Dew taste something like the neon soda sold today. That 1961 version mattered for a reason beyond flavor. For the first time, Mountain Dew was strong and interesting enough to stand entirely on its own, a soda that no longer needed whiskey sitting next to it to justify its own existence. Pepsi Cola noticed. In August of 1964, Pepsi bought Mountain Dew's brand and production rights outright and pushed it into national distribution across the United States and Canada. And here is where a major corporation had a choice most companies never get: quietly retire the Moonshine and shotgun branding for something more respectable, or lean in harder. Pepsi leaned in. The hillbilly imagery stayed on shelves for years afterward, timed almost perfectly with the runaway popularity of the Beverly Hillbillies on television, a show that, at its peak, was pulling in some of the largest audiences of the decade. A private joke two brothers told themselves in a Knoxville bottling plant was now a national marketing strategy for one of the largest beverage companies on earth. By the end of the 1960s, sales had reportedly quadrupled. It didn't stay that way. Through the late 1960s and into the 70s and early 80s, Pepsi tried on new identities for the drink: a brief flirtation with barefoot-feeling, counterculture messaging, a swing back toward folksy nostalgia, a stretch marketed simply as country cool. By the mid-1980s, the hillbilly was gone completely, replaced by ads shot on lakes and mountain trails, built around a young, outdoorsy generation instead of a moonshine still. It found its answer in the early 1990s. Pepsi's marketing team noticed something building in youth culture. Skateboarding, BMX, and snowboarding were shifting from fringe hobbies into an identity kids actually wanted to buy into. Mountain Dew rebuilt itself around that identity completely, launching the slogan that would define it for the next 3 decades: "Do the do." In 1995, it became the very first sponsor of what would go on to become the X Games. A decade later, in 2005, the brand went further still, launching its own traveling extreme sports circuit, the Dew Tour, putting skateboarders and BMX riders on national television under the same name once printed above a cartoon hillbilly. The outlaw energy the Hartmans had once sold through a shotgun and an outhouse now had a new, perfectly legal outlet: extreme sports, sponsored, televised, and thoroughly corporate. The strategy worked, and it worked fast. Diet Mountain Dew had already launched in 1988, quietly proving the brand could stretch beyond one flavor. By the early 2000s, the original had climbed to the 4th best-selling soft drink in the entire United States. In 2001, Pepsi split the brand further, launching the cherry-flavored Mountain Dew Code Red, aimed at a different, more urban audience than the original's young, mostly white extreme sports base, alongside a new energy drink called AMP that would later be spun off into its own standalone brand. A joke mixer from a Knoxville bottling plant had become a full product line. Then came the chapter nobody at Pepsi had planned for. Mountain Dew carries roughly 50% more caffeine per serving than Coca-Cola or Pepsi, alongside a heavy sugar load. And in the same Appalachian hills where the drink was born, it had become something closer to a daily staple than an occasional treat, sipped constantly throughout the day and, in some documented cases, poured into baby bottles. Dentists began recording severe, early-onset tooth decay at rates high enough that Central Appalachia was ranked the most toothless region in the country. In 2009, an ABC News special used the drink's own Code Red flavor name as a grim pun, describing the region's dental emergency as a code red of its own. The phrase "Mountain Dew Mouth" spread nationally from there. Advocates pushed lawmakers to strip the drink from what food stamps could buy, part of a broader national debate over restricting sugary drinks in federal food assistance that reached well beyond Appalachia, but nowhere was one brand name attached to the crisis as directly as this one. Here's what I find genuinely strange about that moment. A drink invented specifically to imitate a substance the government had successfully banned was now, generations later, facing a ban of its own, for reasons that had nothing to do with moonshine at all. The ban never passed. PepsiCo instead partnered with a dentist in eastern Kentucky and expanded its lower sugar and caffeine-free lines, while Mountain Dew itself stayed exactly where it had always been, on gas station shelves, in vending machines, in the hands of the extreme sports fans Pepsi had spent 30 years cultivating. Prohibition-era moonshine had been outlawed successfully, permanently, completely. The soda invented to imitate it never was. In 2024, 60 years after Pepsi first bought the brand, Mountain Dew unveiled a new logo. It wasn't a leap forward. It was a step back. The new design deliberately echoed the curved, vintage look of the brand's earliest identity, and tucked into the lettering, quietly, sits the number 1948, the year Barney and Ally Hartman first trademarked their moonshine joke. Think about the full shape of that story. Two brothers dodge a liquor shortage by bottling a moonshine joke sometime around 1932. They name it after the exact thing federal agents were arresting people for making, and they weren't even the first to use that name. They put a fugitive from the law directly on the label. A corporate giant buys the joke in 1964 and leans further into it instead of walking away. The brand spends decades reinventing itself, first as folksy nostalgia, then as extreme sports fuel, then as a diversified product line worth billions. And in the 21st century, the very region that inspired its name tries, and fails, to get it banned from grocery carts, echoing the exact prohibition the drink was invented to celebrate in the first place. Not bad for a mixer two brothers invented because they couldn't find their favorite whiskey chaser at the store. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe and let me know in the comments. Was the real turning point the 1961 formula that finally let Mountain Dew stand on its own as a soda, or the moment Pepsi decided to keep the hillbilly instead of erasing him? I've gone back and forth on that one more than once.